Alpha Flight issue 9. This was one heck of a fun read, y'all. And this cover is just freaking phenomenal. We see Sasquatch here holding this injured character, and then we just get this lovely dynamic foreground arc of this hand. And you think you know what you're seeing, but you're not 100% sure. And it's just enough to draw you in. And this is another thing that I've said this in several comic reviews. I miss when the title would give you a sense of what you're about to read, rather than where we get a book and it's just like a generic superhero pose or the 6,000 Scotty Young variants, blah, 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 blah. To me, it just feels like it cheapens it. To me, I always felt that the cover should be the artist inside. And don't get me wrong, I love when we'll see an Alex Ross cover, but then you open it up and it's just like, oh, the rest of it's not Alex Ross. Things like that. And that's what I love about these old ones where this is John Byrne's art. We know what we're getting on the inside. So this book, Stan Lee presents the man monster known as Sasquatch, and things aren't always what they seem. Near the peak of Canada's tallest mountains, an isolated research station stands a lonely vigil, drawn itself tighter against encroaching winter. And as the poet Robert Service once had it, the northern lights have seen queer sights. Perhaps tonight we shall see the queerest of all. And I love how when they incorporate the credits into the book. So here we see paneling, beautiful work, and then we see Mount Logan Cosmic Ray Research Center. But then the second part, and kind of like when you see like in Days of Future Past or other ones where like they do like gravestones or paper or whatever. And so we see here on the fence, John Byrne, project director, Andy Yanchus doing the spectrography, Michael Higgins doing signals, Denny O'Neil, project manager, Jim Shooter, funding. And so again, we don't see scripting, pencils. I love when they make you feel like you're part of the club or in on the joke. So instead of it adds, to me, I feel like it enhances it because in a sense they're being meta, but it still doesn't take away from this beautiful, horrific look. Speaking of the way this looks, the coloring here, the way that the ink wash and the colors of the Northern Lights are supposed to be here, makes you think of something you would see from like Bill Sienkiewicz. Very nice homage there. But again, I was looking at the Marvel wiki for this, and they said that when we see this lone wintry outpost, this was very much an homage to John Carpenter's It. So for those of you that remember the movie, the print date on this was April 1984. I can't remember what year it came out, but it was around this time period. So the horrific, isolated winter scene is very much an homage to that movie, which I love more than the original. John Carpenter is one of my favorites. Moving on. Sasquatch, my brain. What's his first name? Is it Hank? I can't remember. I know his last name's Langowski. Langkowski. We'll go with that. I haven't had enough coffee, guys. But anyway, he's been brought here to look at these seismic anomalies that are going on. But this guy here, he's sort of like the douche of the group here. He's a part of the military. And I love how it says, a barely suppressed sigh of annoyance flares Walter Langowski's nostrils. Langkowski's nostrils. In there, Walter. I should have just looked. Look, Mercurto, I know you don't want me here any more than I want to be here. But these constant jabs aren't serving to do anything other than slow us down. We're all tired and on edge, and if you and I could just bury our own personal hatchets, things would go a lot smoother. Don't lecture me, Langkowski. You may be this country's top radiation expert. Around here, you're just another warm body until you've proved your worth. And so they start to see activity. Blast it, Masterson, Mercurto fumes. I've told you not to call this signal an intruder. But as the jagged line suddenly scratches the screen, Walter Langkowski can only smile. I don't know what else to call it, Colonel. And so all of a sudden, the radars pick it up. The hastily modified dish is quiet for a moment. And then, wow, shouts court guard. Some of these names, ugh. When you're like half asleep and you haven't had enough caffeine in your body, guys, ugh, We've hooked something. But what in the blazes is it? And again, just as I've talked about, where you can see how artists are inspired by others, you can definitely see Byrne's inspiration from Jack Kirby with the zoom, 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 the Kirby crackle, the action lines, and we're thinking, oh, we know what's going on here. We know who's on that dish. Holy cow, that's the Thing. And they're just kind of wondering how the hell someone from the Fantastic Four would end up in the Canadian wilderness. Like, well, how are we going to lift him? A little something I picked up on my travels. A shudder seems to pass through Lankowski, as if all his muscles tremble simultaneously. His form seems to swell, his clothing tightens, and burst, and orange fur blossoms over his growing frame. Until in a matter of 5 seconds or so, Walter Lankowski is gone, and in his place stands Sasquatch. And to say the onlookers are startled would be a transcendent understatement. Now, Mr. Grimm, let's get you into the war. But here's the deal. So, I love how they added the tongue. You think of poor Ben. But as the book goes on, that feeling of horror, because this very much turns into a horror story, because bodies start dropping and the Thing disappears. And so Hank goes out to hunt this down, like wondering why someone would take Ben Grimm, who could have hurt the Doctor. Again, read the book if you want more detail on it. I don't want to give away the whole story. But he decides to go out just as Walter and not Sasquatch, which was very much a bad idea, because all of a sudden we see this beautiful work and onomatopoeia there just taken up, and you can see how it encompasses Walter. The blast is enough to hurl him back several yards up the mountain slope. It is a distance he quickly recovers, though in a less than satisfactory fashion. Dazed, battered, and bruised, Lankowski comes at last to a jarring halt, a few yards short of conflagration. So something has happened to the outpost. I know you're still here, monster. I would have seen you if you flew away. Show yourself, blast you! Come out before I come in after you. Bold words, human. I judged you correctly. You are the only warrior in this pathetic group. The only one worthy to face me, to see my true form before you die. I guessed right, didn't I? Somehow it was you all along, not the Thing at all. You miserable alien scum. Yes, disoriented by my return to Earth, I instinctively took a form that would protect me. Now hold your tongue, Earthling, for you are about to receive honor. You are about to perish. And I love the color schemes here, where when we're actually in the wilderness, we get the blues and the purples, and then when the explosions happen, we get the reds and the yellows. And that's just a great way of doing visual storytelling. I don't want to give away any more of this story. Oh, actually, you know what? We're going to skip past that last half, because what's important about this particular issue, other than this being an excellent book and having introduced to the Master of the Universe video game from Mattel Electronics, there's a backup issue in here. Where the hell does it begin? You're going to have to bear with me for a minute. This is the backstory of Aurora, or Jeanne-Marie Beaubier. And you can see how it shows her growing up in the nunnery, whatever the hell it's called, the Covenant, and how essentially she's fighting with herself. I'm not going to give away the whole story. I want you guys to go read this. But how she's always was beaten when she was a child at the school and talked down to, when she finally finds her powers. Because she's thought about, here, actually, I'll read this part. It says, "A stranger in my mirror." It says, "Forgive me, Heavenly Father. Forgive your poor daughter this greatest sin." And so she goes to kill herself, because she's just an orphan at this point. She doesn't know about her brother. But instead of dying, it says something happens, a miracle. The speed of her sudden flight is quite nearly as astonishing as the flight itself. In only seconds, she is more than a mile above the sleeping city of Laval City, Quebec, as joy explodes in her heart. It's difficult, however, to maintain that jubilation as 6 hours later she waits on the hard bench outside the office of the school's headmistress. But the wonder of her discovery still sings through her veins, banishing all previous desires. For a while, at least. And Sister Anne hears not wonder, but blasphemy. Blasphemy to be most severely punished. So if you think about it, Jeanne-Marie kind of had the same type of upbringing as Rain, where rather than trying to be taught something that is supposed to be about love and grace, it's being used as zealotry and everything's evil. How is it the Water Boy, where Mama, I read that Benjamin Franklin created the devil, or created electricity, and she goes, I created electricity. Benjamin Franklin's the devil, and it's just that type of zealotry bullshit. So anyway, as where Rain was saved by Professor X and brought into the New Mutants, as we saw in issue 22, where she's still kind of dealing with those things, Jeanne-Marie didn't have that type of escape as a child. She was beat and molded, and eventually moves up. As she grew up, she became part of the nuns, and she thinks, because of what the sister did to her, she suppressed all this stuff, as Rain didn't. And so, as we've seen, when Jean Paul finally finds her, her brain still burns with the fires that may never be quenched, for hers is a frail and tender psyche, ill-suited to this environment. Oh, Mother, Father, how could you die and leave me in this awful place? I was just a babe. What could I have done that you would punish me like this? And then as she's sitting here having these thoughts, you did nothing. Ooh, oh, sweet heaven, save me. Do not be afraid. I am your friend. I bring you a very special present. And so we see how at this point her psyche splits. And that's why when Jean Paul finally finds her, it's like, what do I do for my poor, sweet sister? And what's interesting is when she becomes the teacher and she becomes Aurora instead of Jeanne-Marie, she goes out on a night in the town of Quebec. And of course, her still kind of being naive to the outside world, things happens, but she is saved by Logan. And so we see how him and Jeanne-Marie finally cross paths, and how he says, I'd like to talk to you about Alpha Flight. And so I just love how we get these backup features to see, because again, Alpha Flight was introduced within the pages of X-Men, and they were supposed to just be a one-off. They were supposed to just be a tie to Logan's past, but they became fan favorites. And so we got more of Vindicator and all the rest of the team, and eventually their own solo book. So I love that, to get more and appreciate them better, we're getting these follow-up stories. Just how we saw in the early issues how Mac stole all the information from the, I can't remember the name of the government place, but essentially how he took all that information so that it wouldn't be used by the government, and uses it for Department H and starts to build Alpha Flight. And so we kind of start to see how all the team members start to merge. So if you've enjoyed what you've seen, guys, this is definitely one of those issues you want in your collection. So please, first and foremost, support your local comic shop or wherever it is to get your action figures and comics, and grab this book. If you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little Alpha Flight bell next subscribe, that way I get to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with you on hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure to the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.